I'm Dean Adshead, and today I'm going to show you key techniques of camera operation. In this short film I will visually guide you through the basics of camera operation. The camera in which the demonstration is on is a Sony HSC 300 on a Vinton Quartz 2 pedestal. The studio we are in is SQ2 in the BBC's Quay House in Salford. It is primarily used for the programmes BBC Breakfast and BBC North West Tonight. I will be demonstrating by actually undertaking the shots and techniques described. There are 6 cameras in SQ2. 5 of these are remotely controlled from the gallery by a shutter queue system. This can control all aspects of the camera except for the physical position of the pedestal. It can also recall shots, which are saved to a touchscreen device for quick access. In SQ2 there is also a camera mounted onto a jib arm for sweeping wide shots of the studio. Before I begin with explaining camera techniques, it is important to mention cables. Attached to all cameras is a large heavy cable. It is important to make sure that cables are laid out effectively to avoid trip hazards or damage to equipment. Never leave cables left laid around like this. A good rule of thumb is to manage cables by reeling them into a figure of 8 shape, like this. As well as this, always make sure that all routing and wall box connections are kept tidy. This is a good example of well-managed cable routing, avoiding damages to cables, equipment or humans. In a studio like this, it is normally managed by technical people, but in situations like outside broadcasts or one-off productions, it is essential that all cables, connections and routing are well managed. Your visual guide when camera operating is the viewfinder on the camera. On this camera, it is a small screen that acts as a guide to what you are shooting and also can be adjusted to show the studio's output for reference of what is actually going to air. The controls on the viewfinder include peaking, brightness and contrast. It is worth noting that if the camera stays focused on a static shot for a long period of time, in order to protect from screen burn, the viewfinder will sleep. To wake the viewfinder, all that is needed is any change in the image that the camera is seeing. Headsets are used so the operative can communicate with the control room or gallery and director. This is essential when operating a camera. All talkback in the gallery can be heard and you can communicate with them by using a push-to-talk button. Information relayed can include program timings, instructions, changes and questions. Now we'll begin with the key techniques of camera operation. Perhaps the most important aspect in camera operation is making sure that the camera is in focus on the subject. This is achieved by zooming in as far as possible on the subject, adjusting focus so it's as sharp as possible, then zooming back as required. Lens tracking ensures that the focus remains calibrated and consistent, regardless of where the lens is zoomed to. Peaking, which enhances edges, can be shown on the camera's viewfinder to assist with this. The more intense the peaking lines are, the more in focus the shot is. Pan is the left to right movement of the camera. Pan bars on the pedestal are moved in the opposite direction to which you want the shot. For example, to pan left, move the bars right. This is a skill which can take time to learn and get right. Tilt is similar to pan, except for the movement is vertical. However, this feature is somewhat limited due to the configuration of the pedestal. Basically, the pedestal itself gets in the way of a tilt, looking completely vertically at the floor. This is overcome by using a dolphin arm, otherwise known as a jib. It's basically a camera mounted on a crane. Pedding means vertical movement of the pedestal itself. You can ped up or down. In this movement, smoothness is essential. A good ped shot should start slow, speed up and then finish slow. Tracking is the movement of the actual pedestal. It is essential when moving the camera that you do so holding the steering ring from the point where the red marker is. This is due to the configuration of the wheels. Using the red marker as a guide will enable you to steer correctly. Tracking shots move towards or away from the subject. So when using this shot you are physically moving the pedestal, so particular attention needs to be paid to the cable running from the camera. This shot can be used to create the impression of width staying the same, yet the subject enlarging by combining a zoom in with a track away. Crabbing is very similar to tracking, except for this is a sideways movement. It can also create the impression of a subject remaining static with the background changing. This is done by pointing in the same position of the subject throughout the movement as shown here. Finally, zoom controls the optical zoom on the camera. The speed of this control can be fine-tuned to suit the operator. Zooming can change the perspective of the background, i.e. making it smaller or larger in comparison to the subject. Obviously, a lot of the time a combination of more than one technique can be used. Here is a closing shot I did for BBC North West Tonight using a combination of zooming out, tilting down and pedding up. This creates the impression of moving out and away from the set and is a classic closing shot for many programmes coming from a studio. I do hope this guide has been useful for you. My name is Dean Adshead and thanks for watching.